Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that you're all here today. What I want to give you today is kind of the definitive webinar on um, what the difference is between helping and enabling an addict. My hope is that by the end of this webinar, you will um, you will know exactly what the difference is. You'll know what to do, what not to do, and why. So that's my goal. And then when we finish with the webinar, when I finish speaking with you, then we'll do a Q&A where you can ask me your questions. So please do write your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them afterwards. So as I've said before in other webinars, you will see me sometimes looking down at my notes just to make sure that I'm staying on track with you, because I have so much that I could say to you. I could so easily get off track. So I'm going to stay on track with you for this next 45 minutes or an hour. Let's start with some really simple definitions with some simple guidelines. So we'll start with enabling. So enabling is when we're doing for someone what they can and should, and that's not a word that I use very often, but can and should be doing for themselves. This is something that we need to stop doing with our addicts, with the addicts that we love. And again, what I've said before in other webinars, I use the term addict. Some people find that disrespectful. I hope you don't. Please know that I don't mean it disrespectfully. I am an addict as well, in recovery with 33 years clean and sober, but I consider myself to be an addict. So I'm going to be using that word. But we need to stop doing that, because doing something for somebody else that they could be doing for themselves takes away their resiliency. And when we take away a person's resiliency, we take away their ability to feel good about themselves, their ability to not have their own self-respect. So it's a really important thing to understand that we need to not do that for them. And when we do enable somebody, it's never, ever, 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 ever a loving act. And I'll tell you why. Even though it feels loving, sometimes you feel like, if you're doing for somebody that's loving to them, but it isn't, because when we enable an addict, we keep them in the addiction. We help them stay in the addiction. We don't help them come out of the addiction. So that's enabling. And of course, we're going to be talking much more about that. Helping. There's a few guidelines for helping, but helping, as opposed to enabling, is when we allow addicts to do for themselves what they should be doing for themselves. That they learn how to operate the washing machine and do their own laundry, that they learn these things, that we don't cook all their meals for them, that we're not giving them money when we shouldn't be giving them money, and we should hardly ever be giving them money. We want to be able to help them feel good about themselves and to have some mastery over their lives. And if we're helping them, that's what's happening. We need to love our addicts enough to not enable them. So helping is loving our addicts enough to not do what we shouldn't be doing for them. Sometimes helping is allowing them to reach a bottom. Sometimes reaching a bottom for an addict is where they need to go so that they can look up and say, I don't like being down here. I don't like this life. I want to have something different. That doesn't happen for too many addicts unless they reach a bottom. But if we keep enabling them through the bottoms that they are trying to reach, then we're not helping them at all. So helping is about setting boundaries from a place of love and not a place of anger. We talked about boundaries last week, and Xander, I'm wondering whether, the people who weren't on the other three, but are here today, whether they can get the links to the other three.
I'm going to be sending the links to all the 4 webinars to everybody in the that I send out after tonight's webinar.
Okay, so we need to set really good boundaries with our addicts, really healthy, respectful, self-respectful boundaries, and they need to come from that place of love instead of a place of anger. What we don't want to do if we're trying to help is say to an addict, just get out of my face, I'm so tired of you. We don't want to come from that place. We want to be able to say in more of a non-charged moment, this isn't working for me, I'll talk with you about it later. And also to have a consequence for the boundary, if they bulldoze over the boundary, to have a consequence that actually means something to the addict. So this is not about punishing the person with the addiction. This is about helping them come out of the bad behaviors that they've been doing, and for you not to put up with those. This next one is, you might want to brace yourself for this, because helping is about you growing stronger within yourself, increasing your own self-respect, which was the second webinar we did. Helping is about you as the loved one doing your own work. You're wanting them to do their inner work. You're wanting them to change what they need to do. You want them to come to counseling. You want them to go to rehab. You want them to do, what they need to do to not be in addiction anymore. If you don't do the same thing, and usually first, this isn't going to work, just so you know. So you need to be doing your own inner work, and that's where we come in. We help loved ones do that so that you can understand yourself better. You can know what it is that's prompting you to want to enable instead of help, so that you can change that. So helping is about reaching out for help for yourself when you need it. So that's those are the guidelines for helping. How do those sound? We having fun yet? So here's the problem. The problem, as I see it, is that as a society, we're not recognizing the deadly consequences of enabling. And I say deadly with all intention. We're not realizing or talking about or doing much about the deadly dangers of enabling. We have to do a lot more educating about this, and we need more prevention and funding and understanding, because enabling is toxic and it can kill your addict. Enabling right now is killing more addicts than we could count. Because living in active addiction, if you're familiar with my work, if you've read my book, or if you have watched some of my videos, you know that I talk about being in active addiction as a choice. There are a lot of different schools of thought about addiction, about genetic predisposition, you know, maybe your father was an alcoholic, so you become an alcoholic. They talk about nature versus nurture. Some people, especially 12-step programs, think it's a disease, like a medical disease. And even if you have a genetic predisposition in your family, even if you think it's a disease, which I don't, and we're going to talk about that in a little while, but even if you think it's a disease, even so, underneath all of that, it's a choice the addict is making to stay in active addiction. Nobody plans to become an addict. I mean, I don't know of anybody who, you know, gets up one morning and says to themselves, gee, I think I'll go and shoot some heroin into my arm for the first time today and start living under the bridge. That'll be fun. Let's do that. You know, nobody plans to be an addict. What happens is that somebody tries a drug at a party, or somebody has some and they like it, so they try it again, or they try something else. And addicts never think that they're going to get addicted because they're special. You know, we all think as addicts, we think we're special and we can handle it. And it isn't going to happen to us. Addiction won't happen to us. It'll maybe happen to you or the guy over there, but it's not going to happen to us. So nobody's planning to become an addict. I don't see addiction as a plan that anybody actually makes for that. But once we become addicted, there's a place in every addict. I know that this is true. This was true of me, and it's been true of every person I've worked with over the last 30 years who had an addiction problem. There's a time in an addict's life when they know that addiction is ruining their lives. They might not think to themselves that it's killing them, although it could, but they know that it's ruining their lives. And whether to stay in active addiction after having that realization, or whether to go into some kind of recovery, that's the choice point. Underneath it all, staying in active addiction is a choice. I don't see addiction as a disease in the same way that cancer or diabetes or heart disease or Crohn's is a disease. I know a lot of people think it is because it has brain involvement to it, of course, because everything that we do as human beings has brain involvement. That's how we're wired. If I, you know, do this with my finger, that has brain involvement in it. When we have a disease, something like Crohn's or cancer, you know, we can't just stop having that. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things we have to do to be able to get over it. And sometimes with something like Crohn's, you don't get over it. There's no cure at this point. With addiction, it's different. You can stop addiction. Any addict can stop using. It's a choice. And it's a choice that the addict has a chance to make when the people around them stop enabling them. If the people keep enabling the addict doesn't have even a chance to make that choice. So that's one of the biggest reasons for you to stop doing what you're doing if you're enabling somebody. Not a good thing to keep doing. There are so, I mean, Xander, we don't have a stat. I think we need to get a stat, you know, of how many people there are in the world who have made the decision to not continue their addiction. I think there are thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people all over the world who have made the decision to stop using. And I've certainly worked with hundreds of addicts over the years who have made that choice. So I know it's a choice. I'm living proof that it's a choice.
I know that there are hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million,
Yeah,
people who are successful, have created success in gaining freedom from addiction
yeah.
under any name, whether it be
What's,
alcoholism or porn or gambling or workaholism or religious fanaticism, or anything.
yeah, so we'll see if we can find you some kind of a stat, but we know gazillions of people make the choice to stop. So it's a choice. Um, the truth is that when you find somebody living in active addiction, there's a really good chance that there's somebody who's enabling them in their lives. Someone who's unaware of how they've been contributing to this problem. Essentially, we are loving our addicts to death. Too many addicts are dying. And this is in huge part because they're being enabled. So this is true of families, it's true of governments, it's true of big pharma, even social agencies who try to help addicts, like people who, agencies who in the downtown east side. Now the downtown east side is an area of Canada that has the lowest income. We call it the lowest income postal code in Canada. Postal code is like a zip code. And it seems to be where most of the addicts and alcoholics congregate in Canada. We have per capita the most addicts and alcoholics, addicts of any kind, but drugs for sure. And more and more and more of them are dying all the time. We have a huge drug overdose problem right now, partly because of the horrible drugs that, like fentanyl, that some of these drugs are cut with, and partly because of enabling. So the problem with these agencies, these social agencies, and I worked in one for 16 years as an alcohol and drug counselor, a wonderful agency called Watari. The problem is that we're not holding addicts accountable for their choices. And sometimes the families aren't being held accountable for their choices either. So I want to give you an example of that. In Vancouver, we have safe injection sites. I think we have 3 of them in the Lower Mainland. We've got one in the downtown east side, and I think we've got 2 in other places. The safe injection site is a place where addicts can come, people who use needles can come and and exchange their needle for a clean needle. They can come in, they can get a clean needle, they come in with their drugs, they shoot up, and they leave. And when they want to shoot up again, they come back and they get another clean needle, and they shoot up and they leave. And I have some really mixed feelings about this. I mean, I'm glad that there are safe injection sites, and I'm glad that people don't have to share needles so that they don't have to get horrible diseases like AIDS, or, in this day of COVID, very dangerous to be sharing needles. I'm happy that that's happening, but I would be a lot happier if there was a condition built into this. If they said to addicts who wanted a clean needle, yeah, please come in. We really want you to be here with us and to have a clean needle. We really want you to save your life. But if you want a clean needle, when you come in for one, you're going to get a 30-minute free counseling session every time you come in. That's the condition. Because some addicts go in 4, 5, 6 times a day to shoot up, and they get a clean needle, and they shoot up and they leave. What if that same addict every time they needed a new needle, came in and got 30 minutes of counseling. I would be a lot happier with that. So I don't think that we're holding addicts accountable. We're not helping them. We're enabling them. We're giving them a free needle. That's fine, but nothing else. And this is what's happening in the downtown east side and in many other places all over the world that have these kinds of agencies who really do want to be helpful, but are not quite making the mark. You know, I started in the downtown east side as an alcohol and drug counselor in 1991. And it was pretty bad. It was a real culture shock for me. And I was 3 years clean, right? But I hadn't been using hard drugs. I'd been using prescriptions. So all of this was kind of new to me. I had a lot to learn. When I left in 2007, it was even worse down there, way worse. We had drug dealers at our front door waiting for our clients to come into Watari, trying to get them to buy drugs instead of get counseling. It was that kind of thing was happening. And, you know, now in nearly 2021, it's so much worse. So many more addicts, so many more alcoholics, so much more death. Why? Because they're being enabled, because the bar isn't being raised for them. And also because families aren't being worked with, because you don't know what to do as the family members. You don't know what to do until somebody shows you what to do. And we understand that. So I want to tell you a few, what I like to call inconvenient truths. They're really important truths about enabling. I like to call them inconvenient truths. You know, Al Gore's, that was the title of his book and his webinar about global warming a few years ago. So as I'm telling you about this, I just want you to be thinking inside. If I had enough time, I'd be opening this up to actually be asking you and have you answer. But I just want you to be thinking about, is it difficult for you to believe that you can't change or control another person? Is it difficult for you to believe that? Do you believe that you can control other people if you just do it right? At least to some extent, do you believe that you can control others? And is that why you keep trying? Because you've tried and you've tried and you've tried. And how has it worked for you to try to control somebody else, especially an addict that doesn't want to be controlled? We live on a planet of free will. I didn't make the rule that it's a planet of free will. Maybe if I ruled the world, then, you know, we'd be able to control each other. I don't know, maybe not, but we can't. Just in case you didn't know that. We can only control the people who will allow us to control them. You know, if we tell somebody, look, I want you to do it this way, and they choose to do it that way, it feels like we're controlling them, but they're really choosing, they're making a choice to do it the way you want them to do it. That's not control. We can't really control another person. And if you don't believe me, I understand, and I strongly suggest that you keep an open mind and see if you can shift your thinking around that, because it's only going to make things harder for you if you don't want to believe that. You don't control anybody else. Sorry, an inconvenient truth. But the thing is that our whole society teaches us that we can control others, and we pass that belief down to our addicts, who then try to control us. So the tables get turned. Does this sound familiar to you? an addict wants something from you, you say no to them, and like a 4-year-old, they say something like, I hate you, you're a terrible mother or father or brother or sister. Why don't you do what I want you to do, the addict says. Or, this is an even better one. This is something I've heard over and over and over again over the years. It's amazing. They say, but oh no, there are some really bad people after me and I owe them money. And if I don't pay them, then they're going to hurt me. They're going to beat me up. They're going to kill me if I don't give them money. So I need money. You have to give me money so that I can give that money to them, or otherwise, or else. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there are no bad people in the world who might hurt an addict, but I am going to tell you that that hardly ever happens. It certainly doesn't happen as often as you may hear it happening. And these bad people have much more of an incentive to let the addict live because they want the money back, if that's even true. They want the money back. They'd rather get the money back than hurt the addict and not get the money back, right? So most of the time, this is something that people who use drugs have heard other people say to their families, and they've gotten money. Sometimes they get thousands of dollars from their families to pay these bad guys. And then maybe a few months later, guess what? There are more bad people who are chasing them and they need more money. And the family doesn't know what to do because they love their addicts and they don't want anything to happen to their addicts, so they pay. It's like ransom. I would suggest that, if you're in a situation like that, that you say to them, if they play some kind of wonderful guilt trip, creative guilt trip on you, that you say, okay, well, if you need some money, what I'm willing to do is, I'll pay you a little bit of money at a time, but I'm not going to give you the money. I'm going to give those guys the money. So you got to show me that they really exist, because we've got some trust issues going on. And if I do decide to pay some money for this, then with every payment of money I give, you have a counseling session with somebody that I find for you. What about that? So they don't just get money from you. They don't just get something from you without having to have any kind of positive consequence to help them maybe come out of their addiction. It's okay if they start counseling feeling resistant. It doesn't matter why they come. What matters is why they stay. So it's okay to introduce them to this. If they want something bad enough, maybe they'll try it.
Peter, could you get me a glass of water, please?
Can that be, whoever is not muted, could you please mute yourself? Whoever just asked for a glass of water, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. So this is the deal. Just a minute, I'm gonna just mute myself so that I can clear my throat. Hang on a minute. Hopefully that will help. This is the deal. We cannot change an addicted person who doesn't want to change, especially when that person is enabled. If you're doing everything for the addict, why should they change anything? They kind of have it made, at least on paper. They've got it made. Why should they do anything differently? An enabled addict doesn't recover. This is what we know for sure. So we can't change an addicted person who doesn't want to change. But what we can look at is, tell you what, if anybody has a piece of paper and a pencil near them, just write these letters down. W, I, F as in Frank, M as in Mary. W-I-I-F-M. W-I-I-F-M. IFM stands for what's in it for me? And I actually think that's a really good question that we all need to be asking ourselves. What's in it for me? The addict is certainly asking that of himself, like, what's in it for me to change anything? Maybe you need to be asking yourself, what's in it for me if I keep enabling? Probably years and years and years more of misery. What's in it for me if I learn how to actually help? Well, that could change things substantially. So what's in it for me? What kind of consequences do you need to set for the addict so that they will think that maybe there's something in it for them to change? If you don't do more of some recovery work, you can't live here, whatever, something like that. So let's look at what we can do. You know, we've been talking about the problem. Let's look at the solution. But again, brace yourself, because this might not be the easiest thing for you to hear. It's kind of the same thing that I was saying before. In order for this to change, you are going to need to unlearn your own dysfunctional behavior patterns. You're going to need to become more self-aware of how you've been contributing to this addiction continuing, because if you expect the addict to do his or her inner work and you don't do yours, it's not going to work. It just isn't. You're not giving, you know, any positive, healthy role modeling to the addict. You're not going to change what's happening in the family so that they can be in a different situation. So the first part of the solution is that you need to be looking at yourself, and you need to make a commitment to do that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why rehab centers don't usually work. And there's a few that are pretty good out there, but most of them cost a lot of money, and most of them, what most of them do is they focus primarily on the addict. I know this, I've been in rehab. They focus on the addict. There's very little that's done with the family. There may be, you know, a family education weekend or something like that every once in a while, but then the family goes home and still has to deal with it themselves. So there's no real counseling for the family on how to do this differently. So there's maybe a little bit of support, but there's no real family work that gets done. And if a rehab center follows the 12-step model, which most of them do, then this is what they're going to tell the addict, and this is what they're going to tell you as the family when they educate you. They're going to tell you that the addict has a disease. The addict is powerless over that disease. And because the addict is powerless, the addict is going to relapse sometimes. And, you know, it's just a normal, natural part of recovery for an addict to relapse. So don't worry about it if that happens. And at Love with Boundaries, we think that that is a total setup for failure. First of all, they don't really have a disease. They're making a choice. Secondly, they aren't powerless. They have choices. They can say no to a drug. They can say no to a drink. They can say no to gaming and gambling and porn and anything else that they might be doing. So they don't have a disease, they're not powerless over the disease, and no addict has to relapse. You don't have to relapse. I'm living proof that you don't have to relapse. I have 33 and a half consecutive years, day after day after day, of being clean and sober. Xander has 36. I've just outed him. He has 36 years of choosing that every day and working on himself so that he chooses that every day. You, as the loved one, you are required to control only yourself. But what you need to do is you need to raise the bar for both you and your addict, and maybe for the rest of your family, so that you're holding everybody accountable for bad behavior, for enabling, for addiction, for all of the stuff that's going on that doesn't have to be going on in your family. It doesn't have to be this way. Please, please try to believe me. It just doesn't have to be this way. So one of the basic tools for loved ones to kind of get into this and really understand this is the wonderful, amazing serenity prayer. And I think if I asked for a show of hands, most of you would know the serenity prayer. So the serenity prayer is just one of the most awesome, tiny little pieces of writing that I have ever seen. And it's recited at the end of every 12-step meeting. It's part of the deal of 12-step meetings. The thing is that they do it really fast. After a meeting ends, they get up, they hold hands, or they put their arms around each other's shoulders, and they say it like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference, keep coming back, it works. And that's what they say. That's it. And, one day I thought to myself, wait a minute, what is the serenity prayer really saying? So I went into it and I started to explore it. So I want to explore it just a little bit with you today. And you can write it down if you want to, but again, you're going to get the recording, and you can go online and look up serenity prayer, and you'll get all kinds of versions in all kinds of calligraphy that you can print out. So maybe for now, you can just listen. So the first line, the first of four, is God, and that's whatever it means to you. You don't have to be religious, or you can be, whatever God means to you, or whatever word you want to substitute for that. Grant me the serenity, the peace, the calmness, the very things that loved ones of addicts don't have. Right? If you have an addict in your life, then you know that you don't have a whole lot of serenity in your life, because you're always worried. You're always focusing. You're always right there with your addict. You're kind of addicted to your addict's addiction, and you might as well be shooting the addict into your arm. So we need to be looking at your addiction to the addiction. So it's grant me the serenity, the peace, the stillness, the calmness. Let me get some sleep. To the second line, to accept the things I cannot change. So we start looking at the things we cannot change. And, some of the things that people say when I ask them, so what can't you change? They say, well, you can't change the weather. That's usually the first thing somebody says. And that's true. It's been raining in Vancouver. I wanted the sun to shine yesterday. I don't think it was. But even if it was, if I wanted it to rain, it wasn't going to rain, right? I mean, we're all powerless over that. We're powerless over how fast time is going and how old we are. That's certainly something I'm experiencing right now. How did this happen? How did the time go so fast? Powerless, can't control that. I had a client once who who told me that she could control whether the grass was green because she could just paint it purple. And I thought that was very creative, and I gave her a lot of kudos for that one. But she's wrong, of course, because if you go underneath the purple paint, the grass is still green. You can't control that kind of stuff. So the other thing that most people don't like to say is they can't control other people. But I'm here to tell you that you can't control other people, not unless they let you control them. And if they let you control them, you're not really controlling them. That's how that works. So to accept the things I cannot change, the weather, the time, the grass is green, other people. Third line, the courage. And I love that they say courage, because it takes courage to change the things I can. What can we change? There's only one thing that I know of. Each of us can change ourselves. That's about it. And really, all we can change about ourselves, our choices and our reactions. That pretty much covers all of it. That's what we can change, but it takes courage. What I'm asking of you, what I'm suggesting you do, I know this isn't easy. I've had to do it. I know it isn't easy, but it's also not easy to live the way you've been living. It's a lot easier to do this inner work because there's a light at the end of that tunnel. So the courage to change the things we can. And this fourth line is the most important line of the Serenity Prayer. The wisdom to know the difference. If we don't have the wisdom to know the difference between what we can change and what we can't change, and most people don't have that wisdom because they haven't looked at it, we keep trying to change what we can't change. We keep using our energy in negative ways, trying to change what we simply cannot change. So grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I really want to leave that with you today. If you can see your way to using that, you know, one of the questions that comes up is, okay, so if I can't control somebody else, if that's something that I need to accept, then why do I keep trying to help, but I enable instead? Why do I keep trying to change what I can't change? Well, one of the reasons that we keep trying to help, and it usually comes out as enabling, is because we love them. We love the addicts in our lives, and we remember them before they became addicted most of the time. Sometimes when we're in partnership or married to somebody who's an addict, maybe they've been that way for the whole time we've known them. But for most people in a relationship with an addict, we remember the person they were before they became addicted, and we love them so much, and we want them to be happier. We want them to be healthy. We also fear deeply. We fear what will happen if we don't try to help. So we keep trying, we keep trying, we keep trying. But I think that we need to fear more what's going to happen to them if we keep enabling them. That's going to be worse for them. We're also, you know, those of us who are in relationships with addicts, we're all across the board, we're codependent. We put other people's needs ahead of our own. We keep trying to make somebody else love us. We keep trying to do the right thing for somebody else so that they won't get mad at us, right? So we try to be really nice. We try to be so nice. And we think to ourselves, well, I'm such a nice person. Why why do people abuse me? Why are people nasty and mean to me? I'm so nice. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And the truth is that you're not that nice. You're not that nice. I'm not saying that you're not nice. I'm nice most of the time. I have my moments when I'm not, but it's not that you're so nice. That's not why you're doing it. If you can really own this, that will help you a lot. So you're not people pleasing because you're such wonderful, nice people. You're people pleasing because you don't know how to deal with somebody else's anger. You don't know how to deal with it when somebody gets mad at you or frustrated with you, or when you say no and they don't want you to say no. And so this is a self-protection for you. That's why you do it. And I appreciate it. I appreciate that you want to protect yourself. You're in a difficult situation. But to enable an addict because you're afraid to say no has its roots in some selfishness on your part, and it will keep your addict stuck. So I'm asking you, I'm imploring you, please do the work that it takes for you to understand yourself better so you can change the dysfunctional dynamics. Because I guarantee you, your addict is not going to come to you and say, please set some healthy boundaries for me. I really want some healthy boundaries. Like, that's not going to happen in most cases. If you have an addict that does that, that's fantastic. Set some healthy boundaries. But most of the time, that is not what happens. So you're the one first that needs to shift and change and grow and develop and respect yourself and teach your addict to treat you in a different way. That's what they need. That's what helping is really about. And helping is also about you reaching out for help when you need it. I've talked about that before. So what you're needing to do is to shift from the dysfunctional behavior that you've been doing. You maybe haven't been aware of it. You haven't known what else to do. Really, I understand. You need to shift from that behavior into healthy assertiveness. I have a very short paragraph that I want to read to you from my book, Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. Some of you have it, some of you've read it. If you have it, and it's right there, this is on page 103 if you've got the newer version. Very short. When your addicted loved one demands something of you, it will become easier for you to tell him or her that what is being asked of you is not appropriate, and you are choosing to not follow through with it. If the addict decides to rage or issue ultimatums, you will not have to give in to the manipulation. In short, you will stop enabling. That's your job. This is your job. This is how you stop enabling, is to understand that doing it isn't a good idea ever, ever, and learning more about yourself so that you understand why you've been doing it. You also need to be working on your own self-care. So, holistically, self-care is about physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. The chapter of about self-care in my book is the longest chapter in the book because it's so important. And over the years, I have become a self-care queen. I take very good care of myself, and I encourage the people around me to take care of themselves. And I encourage you to read that chapter and to start developing a self-care plan if you don't have one, and stick to it and start feeling what it feels like to take care of yourself instead of having all your needs on that back burner and your addict being more important than you. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is why it's continuing that way. So if you have read my or listened to my TEDx talk um, about this, you've heard about the NOPE program that I have. I'm going to just explain it to you really briefly. So the NOPE, I like to call it NOPE, NOPE. I'm going to tell you what NOPE stands for, and you'll get the gist. And if you want more information about that, you can listen to the TEDx talk. So the N in NOPE stands for no. It stands for no money. No money. When we give an addict money, we know exactly where that money is going to. Do you want to contribute to that? I don't think you do. The O in NOPE stands for out. So out of the house, out of my life right now the way it is. We'll change some things. But if you choose to stay in active addiction, you don't get to live here. You don't get to do the things that you've been doing. We'll find someplace else for you to be, but you can't be here. No, out. The P is for preserving the family unit, the circle of love in your family. The addict has been tearing the family apart in most cases. There's so much, there are siblings and parents and cousins and everybody else who just feel really awful about what's happening with that person's addiction. It's horrible for everybody that's involved. And we need to preserve the family unit and stop allowing the addict to run roughshod over that. They don't get to have all the attention anymore. Not going to happen. P, preserving the family unit. And E, NOPE, E stands for enabling, and enabling is never an option. No more enabling, never an option. NOPE, nope. So in conclusion, basically what you're going to need to do as a loved one, you're going to need to stop blaming the addict. You're going to need to stop saying to yourself, oh, if only the addict, if only so-and-so would just get his act together, my life would be so perfect, everything would be so fine, it's their fault. Stop doing that. And instead become willing to see how you've been contributing to this situation so that you can stop doing that. Some of you on this webinar may be Al-Anon members. You may go to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is a 12-step program for the family members of alcoholics. There's also Nar-Anon, which is for family members, loved ones of drug addicts. And Al-Anon is a more well-known program. I think it's been around longer. Al-Anon has something called the 3 C's. So the 3 C's are, we didn't cause it, we can't control it, and we can't cure it. And I totally agree with that. We didn't cause it. The addict's making choices. I don't care what you've done or what you haven't done. The addict is making his or her own choices about being in active addiction, period. You can't control it because you can't control an addict who doesn't want to be controlled. You can't control anybody else anyway. But if an addict wants to continue to use and they're being enabled to do so, they're not going to stop. And we can't cure it. It's an interesting one because I think it actually can be cured. I think we need to be careful when we're addicts to, continue to work on ourselves and make sure we reach out. I reach out for help whenever I need it, so that I can stay clean and sober. That's a choice I make. I can't cure anybody else's addiction because that's not my job. My job is to look after myself. Their job is to cure their own addiction. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But I'm going to give you the 4th C. The fourth C is we did contribute to it. And we can do something to stop whatever enabling we're doing. We have contributed to this addiction continuing, and we can stop doing that. That's the fourth C. Don't wait until this is really bad. I mean, some of you, I know some of you because we're working with you, and some of you have waited until it was quite bad, some of you not. But don't wait anymore. If you're not getting help, get some help. If you need it, if you're not sure what to do, we offer a free 30-minute telephone consultation. All you have to do is fill out our questionnaire, submit it to us. As soon as we get it, we'll get back to you. We'll schedule the call. You can tell us what's going on for you in your particular situation, and we'll tell you how we might be able to help you. And if you don't reach out for help, if the proper kind of help and intervention, therapeutic kind of intervention is not, if you don't get that, addiction just gets worse and worse and worse. And you've probably experienced this over the years, most of you. So what will really help the addict is for you to get the help you need and to take care of yourself. Let's develop our self-respect. Let's develop our own resiliency. Let's stop contributing to addiction, and let's start loving our addicts to life instead of to death. Let's love them to life. That's my webinar today. And I'm here for questions. We'll open it up. Xander, are you around?
You betcha.
Yep. Okay.
So we have some questions that have been sent in from people who emailed them in. And I am going to ask the following one, and it's echoed by another person who also has a similar question.
Okay.
And how does one handle the anxiety and guilt and shame when a loved one keeps running up against the addict's risky behavior that may be life-threatening to the addict?
Yes.
For example, creating a homeless situation for themselves by going into the winter during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
So handle the anxiety and guilt and shame about having to tell that addict that they can't continue to get support when they're continuing to run risky behavior.
So it's not so much about telling the addict that they can't get that support if they're going to be doing these behaviors. It's about handling the shame and guilt, the feelings around doing that. That's
the question.
That's the question.
How does one handle the anxiety and guilt and shame?
The anxiety and the guilt and shame. Well, there's not a blanket answer to that question, but what I will tell you is that can be helped, and we can help you with that. That's exactly what we do. So I understand the shame and the guilt. I understand the anxiety. This is one of the worst times in our history, especially for addiction and especially for loved ones. COVID, horrible. It's just impacted and put so much more onto an already really difficult situation. One of the things that I will say to you about guilt and shame, there is a difference between guilt and shame. A lot of people use them interchangeably. Guilt is about having made a mistake. I made a mistake and I feel guilty. Shame is about, I pretty much am a mistake. I do everything wrong. I'm just a horrible, terrible person. And I hate myself. And that's the difference between guilt and shame. both of them can be mitigated. Both of them can be worked on. And the anxiety that you're feeling, I think that's part of being a loved one of an addict. And even if you're not enabling anymore, even if you're doing all the right helping behaviors and your addict is out there using, it's kind of going to be part of the deal that you're going to feel some anxiety. But you're going to know that you're doing the very best things for the person that you love, and also for you, and also for the rest of your family. So some of the shame, some of the guilt, the shame is a really interesting one. With addiction as a loved one, the shame comes from, I can't tell anybody that I have an addict in my family. I can't tell anybody because nobody's going to understand, and they're all going to judge me, and they're all going to think that I'm the terrible person that I really think I am. And so I can't tell anyone. And so I live with the secret. And there's a saying that our secrets keep us sick, and I think they really do. So for you to be able to talk more about your shame, for you to be able to talk more about your guilt, bring it out to the sunlight, bring it out to the light, and let's work with it, let's deal with it. And the anxiety, I think it will lessen a little, but I think it's going to be there. I don't know of any way to get rid of that completely, because you love your addict. You're going to feel that way.
Thank you for that. And then there's another question that is kind of the same, but I'm going to ask it anyways. How do I not let guilt influence my decisions? A year ago, I stood firm and told my son I was moving out of state after he lived with me for almost 2 years, during which time he never worked, just stayed home and did drugs
Yeah.
in spite of my disapproval.
Yeah.
I've not heard from him in 6 months, and I'm so worried. I want to call him because I'm afraid he is homeless. And my heart is broken that he may be cold and hungry, but I don't call because I don't want to get entangled again.
Yeah.
Holidays coming up makes it really tough.
Yeah.
Thank you for any advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And starting from the end of that, the holidays coming up does make it even tougher. There's no question about that. And the way that we're being encouraged and sometimes mandated to spend the holidays by ourselves with only, a few people in our immediate families, that makes it even tougher. I think that you're on the right track by not getting embroiled in it again until you do some work on how you would handle it differently if you did connect with him. And once you know how to handle that in a different way that isn't codependent, that isn't enabling, then I would encourage you to get in touch with him. By really understanding that not enabling him is the best thing for him. And sometimes that is so hard because, if you did find out he was homeless and you just gave him money or you just pay his rent and he'd have a place to live, but then what? And then what? And then what?
Yeah.
So,
We've heard these stories a lot from people about how there's one thing and then another and another, and it becomes like a leaky tap.
Yeah, that's right. So when you have gotten some help for yourself and you have more understanding of all of this, you have more understanding of yourself, you have more understanding of the dynamics of enabling and helping and how they pertain to you and your particular situation, then it doesn't take that long to get it. Most people get it really quickly. They just have to kind of fine tune it then to fit it to their situation. But that's when you reach out and you say, this is what I'm willing to do for you if you're willing to do this. If you're willing to get some counseling, for example, if you're willing to get some counseling, then I'm willing to pay a month or two of rent for you. If you're willing to commit to that. and you find ways to get in touch with him and help him, not just give and give and give and give and give, which is not good for him.
Right.
But I hear you and I feel you, and I'm sorry that you're going through this, especially now and especially this year. It's really hard. There's just no question about it.
Right.
Please reach out. We're here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Candace. So then a question in the chat. Candace, did you have enablers in your life when you were an active addict?
Mhm.
The changes in their self-respect and behaviors help you to change?
Yes and no. I had enablers. They did not change. My family would not, they just would not get any help. They wouldn't come to family day when I was in rehab. Those are the kinds of things that would happen. This is a very dysfunctional family. It took me a long time to understand that their responses to my situation weren't about me being a bad person. So when I could really understand that they were making their own choices, they still enabled me, they still gave me money, they still did that stuff, but I could start looking at myself differently. I didn't have to feel like that black sheep in the family. I didn't have to feel like the odd one out, the wrong person. I'm not explaining this well, but I didn't have to do that anymore. So that's when I was able to start really doing some work on myself and developing the self-respect that I didn't even know I didn't have. Now I know I didn't have it. I'm never not having it again. Don't you love double negatives? I'm never not having it again.
Sounds like you're going to hang on to it.
I'm hanging on to it. That's my story and I'm sticking with it. So yes, I had enablers. No, they did not change. Things would have been much easier for me if they had. And I see families now, I work with families now that are so willing to change. And they love their addicts so much that they're willing to do what it takes to help them. And it warms my heart every time I see it. So.
And working as a counselor also with you, I've had many of those experiences with our clients. And it's such a joy for us to see when they make the changes and the way that acts like the locomotive pulling the train.
Yeah.
That so often.
Yeah. And
is as a result.
And what we know is that it won't change unless they do that.
Or the change is only going to get worse.
Yeah.
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 So then we have another question.
Thank you for asking that, by the way. Yeah, good question.
What about gambling addiction, where certain programs suggest you take over the addict's finances? Do you see this as helping or enabling? And how do you do that without it actually being enabling?
I think that if there's a mental health issue, like a severe one, then it may be a helpful thing to do. But having said that, if somebody's going to take over an addict's finances, gambler or whatever, I would suggest it not be the family member.
Okay.
I would suggest it be somebody else, maybe somebody legal, or maybe, somebody that doesn't have the kind of emotional pull of I need money, and they'll give them money. Right? So I think that when families take over a gambler's or an addict's finances, they're doing for the addict what the addict needs to learn how to do for themselves. And that's enabling. Because how long is that going to go on? And why should an addict learn? Why should a gambler learn how to control money? Why should he learn how to do that? And on top of all of that, he's getting all this attention from his family. He doesn't maybe like it, and it's negative attention, but it's still attention.
Right.
It's still a hook. So I don't think it's a good idea. And I think that if it really needs to be done for some kind of other reason, then we look at that and we figure out a solution, the best way of having that done. But otherwise, no. I mean, if a gambler is going to be enabled to have enough money to gamble and somebody will pay their rent or somebody will, stop them, because I think a gambler will find a way to get that money anyway if they really don't want to stop gambling. I mean, one of those vicious cycles that happen. So the overall answer is I don't think it's a good idea. And if it absolutely has to be done, let's find another way to do it.
Okay, thank you. So another question that's been submitted is, what about mitigating heroin addiction by just smoking marijuana? And is there a difference between, and sort of like a separate question that's also along the same lines, is there a difference, a significant difference between the injection drugs like heroin and opioids and marijuana as an addiction?
Well, millions and millions would disagree with me. My drug of choice was pot. I used a lot of pills because I could get them, but pot 30 years ago was 35 years, 33, was not that easy to get. I had to go to the dealer. I had to, deal with kind of scuzzy people. And it wasn't like you dial now and they show up at your door. So I know pot, I know the drug, I know it's cut with even more addictive things now. I know that it's legal in our whole country of Canada. I know that when I'm driving down the street, I see people smoking in their cars, and I know that they're mind altered, and I get away from them as quickly as I can because I remember what it was like to drive using pot or do anything using pot. You're mind altered. So, and I also know that pot is addictive. I was addicted to it. So I know that it's stored in the fat cells and it's there, it's in your body for a long time. It takes a while to get rid of it. I have really mixed feelings about pot having been legalized because I think it can be a dangerous drug. I think it can also be a recreational drug. I think that there are some people, I don't completely understand them, but I know that there are some people who can smoke on weekends, when they've got time, not every day and every night like I was doing it. There are some people who can stop using pot. So there you go. They can just stop without getting any help for it. I don't know. There are some people like that, more power to them. Heroin, heroin is a very addictive drug. It's a mind-altering drug, just like pot. I don't know whether pot is a gateway drug to other drugs because sometimes people just start with something like heroin. They don't even bother with pot. Alcohol is the same kind of thing. It's legal and it's toxic and it's poison in the system and it's deadly. And I'll tell you, with what pot has in it now, it's so much worse in a person's lungs than even cigarette smoke is now. So, so do I think it's worse? Do I think it's better? A drug is a drug is a drug, and it really depends on why we're using addiction in the first place. And most people are using drugs because they don't feel good about themselves or their lives, and they want to get away from whatever reality they're dealing with, and that's why they're using, because they don't want to face and learn how to deal with reality. That's what anxiety is about too. I don't know how to deal with reality. So, I have an issue sometimes with things like methadone and Suboxone, which people can stay on for 20, 30 years, and that shouldn't be happening. This is a big question, and I'm not quite sure what the question under the question is, but if the person who asked it would like to put the question in the chat that they really want answered, you know, the question behind the question kind of thing, then I'm happy to look at that.
Okay, so we have a few more questions in the chat.
Okay.
And one is a scenario. I haven't heard from my addict in 4 months. I've told him no about living with me. He won't
Okay.
ask. He would stay in touch just to check in. Now, what if something happened? When or should I contact authorities?
So you don't know where he is. You don't know whether he's okay. What, just wondering what authorities you would contact, like how would you go about doing that? If you're not sure where he is, who would you contact? I understand your question. I think that it's okay to try to reach out and see if somebody's okay. If you find him and he's still using, then you've got some decisions to make about how you want to proceed with that. You also may find out something that's very hard for you to find out, and hopefully you'll have some support in, you know, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try to find him, that you'll have some support in whatever it is that you find, because it could be pretty difficult for you.
Okay.
Either way, it could be difficult for you. My thought is, you know, if he was doing okay, he'd probably be more in touch with you. So I understand the longing and the yearning to get in touch and to want to know. And I just would like to encourage you to have some, you know, some help and support before you make a decision to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Then do all addictions, sex, porn, social media, alcohol, food, etc., 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 always get worse, and why is that?
I think yes, I think they do. As I've said, you know, addiction is addiction is addiction, and addiction is a symptom, regardless of what way it's expressed, you know, whether it's sex or it's drugs or it's food or it's, you know, it's the same thing. And it's a way for a person to hide from life. And if a person isn't, if that person, the addict, isn't helped to be able to deal better with their lives, then they're just going to keep using. They're going to keep using whatever the substance is, or whatever the behavior is. The thing with addiction is there's a point, we call it tolerance. It works differently if it's a mind-altering substance or if it's a mood-altering behavior, but it's still the same thing. So if you've got a gambler, for example, who goes to the casino every weekend, that person is going to start going to the casino 3 times a week. And then that person is going to go to the casino 4 times a week. And then they might supplement it with bingo or online gambling or whatever. And it's just going to take over a person's life, because it's a way of not dealing with their daily life tasks that need to be dealt with. It also gives them attention from the family, usually. So, you know, with sex or porn, those behaviors become worse and worse and worse too, because we start needing more of whatever that addiction is to be able to get the same kind of hit, the same kind of high that we were getting from it to begin with. It gets a little old after a while. We need more. That's why they talk about pot being a gateway drug. Is, well, I'm getting a high from pot, but what would Coke do for me, right? And if I'm really high on Coke, then maybe I can use some heroin to come down. And a lot of people do that, and it just gets worse and worse. So the addiction is a symptom of how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our lives, and it does just get worse and worse without the kind of proper treatment, appropriate treatment that's needed, counseling, understanding, self-understanding of why we're sabotaging our lives.
Okay, thank you. The last question that's in the chat is, it's another scenario. After setting boundaries with my addicted daughter, she sought out another enabler and moved to another province. Her addiction has become worse, and the enabler she is with refuses to see what he is doing. Knowing I cannot control her or the enabler, I fear for her life. I have no contact with her directly. And the implied question there is, what can I do?
Well, I would say that the enabler in her life, the man she's with, I'm assuming it's a man, I think either way, he's getting his needs met by having her in his life. Whatever he's doing, he's getting something from it, and that's why he's doing it with her. So they've got this kind of symbiotic, enmeshment going on together that on some really dysfunctional level is working for them. What I think you can do, if you know how to get in touch with her, what you could do is maybe send her a Christmas card. It's that time of year. And you could say to her, I'm here if you want to do something, if you want to get some help, I'm so here for you. I love you very much, and I would love to help you get some relief from this. So you can let me know if you're ever wanting that.
Okay, thank you.
If you're going to stay in the addiction, if you're going to stay doing what you're doing, I might not be able to have too much contact with you. But if you're ready for help at any point, please let me know.
Okay, thank you, Candace. At this point, we only have a few minutes left. Is there anybody who has a question that would like to directly ask it of Candace? If you would, then please unmute yourself and proceed.
I have a question.
Please,
Great.
go ahead, Desiree.
Desiree, yes. So you speak of your loved one being in active addiction. I was just wondering, is there a specific time frame that you would consider for an active addiction? The reason that I do ask this is because my husband has been an alcoholic for our entire married life, which has been 28 years.
Wow.
He has gone time periods when I basically have said, okay, this is enough. So he'd go for a few months, but fall back into the same pattern. Currently, he hasn't had anything to drink for 2 months, possibly because he's now living with his parents, and claims to me that, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore. I want to work things out. I don't trust that.
Right.
But I'm wondering, with active addiction, is there a specific time that he would go that may give me a idea that maybe this time he won't drink? Because I've seen him go 5 months before. I think that would have been the longest time.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Desiree. No, there's not a time limit. What there is instead underneath it is an intention.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something called a dry drunk. Have you heard the term?
Yes, I have.
So a person who doesn't drink, but is not doing much in terms of much or anything, in terms of actually being in recovery, of working on himself to understand himself better, to make some different decisions, to see how this is hurting his wife and his family. That's a dry drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who stay in dry drunkenness, I just made that up, for a long time because they're allowed to. They're allowed to. You know, when you get to the point, you said it yourself, when you get to the point where you say to him, I've had it, that's enough, he stops drinking.
Right.
Then he falls back into it because your boundaries have been a little too lax maybe, or somehow you're still going to be there for him if he drinks again. So he drinks again.
I say comfort zone.
Well, it's your comfort zone somehow too.
Oh,
But
yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, so I would say no, there's not a time limit necessarily. There's more of an intention underneath. Is this person going to do the work? That's you raising the bar, is saying it's not enough for you to stay sober. It's not enough for you to not drink. You're still exhibiting alcoholic behavior. You're not seeking counseling. You're not getting any help to see how your behavior affects the rest of us. I'm not good with that. Does that help?
Perfect. Yes, very much. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. So, is there anyone else who has a question before we close out tonight?
Yes, speak now. It's the last chance you have in 2020.
I have a question.
Okay, Pat.
Thank you so much for this webinar. I've been attending all of yours and I'm finding them very enlightening.
Thank you.
And I've learned a lot today about how it's not a disease, but a choice. And I know you've said that before, but every time I hear it, I guess I believe it more. But my question is that I, being the loved one of an addict, I have to start working on myself. And I've heard you say that. I have to stop enabling. And I would agree, I have to understand how I'm enabling. And I don't think I understand that right now.
Okay.
And so how do I begin my journey to begin to understand my enabling? I will say that I have started to draw harder boundaries and pay more attention to self-respect, which has changed the dynamic in the right direction since I've been listening to your webinars these past several weeks.
This is my happy dance. Yay.
I want to keep going. I don't want to become complacent. And I want to understand better how I have been enabling so that I can stop.
I'm so glad to hear that. I just wish everybody could be like you. I think there are two things that I would say. One is you might want to get a copy of my book if you don't have it.
I have read it a couple of times.
Okay, fantastic. And listen to some of the videos that I've done. We also, I talked about the 30-minute free consultation that you can get from us.
Yes.
Where we can hear about what's going on for you specifically and tell you how we might be able to help you. And with most people that we talk to, we can help them. There are some that we don't take on, but most people we can help. And you do sound like one we could help for sure. Okay. All you have to do to be able to get that 30-minute consultation is to fill out our questionnaire. And I think, Xander, you'll give everybody that link in the email.
Will be in the email that everybody gets with all of the links to the recordings.
Right. Okay.
All of these webinars.
Okay. So if you'll answer the questionnaire and submit it to us, as soon as we get it, it's usually Xander who does the intake calls.
Okay.
And he will get back in touch with you right away and set up a time, because we know that these issues don't wait. We know that when you get in touch with us, you mean it and you want something and you're ready. So we'll get back to you right away, and that's how you get started.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Look forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And when you fill out the questionnaire, would you please say that you were on this webinar and you asked a question? Because your name is kind of, there are a lot of Pats. So I just want to make sure, I want to make
Yes.
sure, I don't want to ask your last name here. So I want to make sure we know
will.
who we're dealing with. Yeah,
I will.
good.
Thank you.
Okay,
And,
great.
and I hope you can get the humor of this. That was Candace's pat answer.
Oh, oh.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to our webinar. And for any of the comments or feedback that you have, when I send out this, the email with the link to this recording, I'll be asking you for your thoughts and experiences. And we also want to share with you Candace's newest book, which she has just picked up, ready to show it off. She's so happy and proud about it.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Candace.
Okay, so this is my third book, and it's a journal, which is something I haven't done before. It's a journal that's based on the Self-Respect Sunday pieces that many of you have signed up for and you get on Sundays. It's now on Amazon, and there's a look inside feature that so that you can see some of the images, because they're beautiful images, just like the Self-Respect Sunday pieces. So I'll show you a couple of them. This is one of them. And they have quotes on them from my first book, From Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. And then they have journal pages with butterflies, of course, on them, because everybody knows I love butterflies. So I will show you one that I like very much, if I can find it quickly. I should bookmark these, right? Well, I'll show you this one. This isn't the one I was thinking of, but I'll show you that one. Is that easy to be seen? Can you see it?
Relatively, yes.
Yeah? Okay, and then I'll read you the quote on it. It says, having the wisdom to know the difference, because it's what we were talking about today, between what you can and cannot change, and knowing how to change the things you can control, will create both the serenity and the self-respect that you've been wanting to find in your life. So to be able to see these images and read the quotes and have them be guideposts for you to learn more about yourself, to be able to do some writing about yourself and to go a little bit deeper, you know, that's what this book is about. And I think it would be a nice Christmas gift too. I'm glad that I finally, you know, have it up on Amazon for Christmas, and a couple of the bookstores here in Vancouver are going to carry it too, which I'm very excited about. But I think it would be a nice gift for anybody who is a loved one of an addict, and maybe, just maybe, that means yourself, you know? So go on to Amazon. It's on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com, and probably other Amazons as well. And Xander is going to give you the links for that. And look inside and just take a look and see what you think. This is the cover. So this is what you're looking for.
Back it away from the camera a tiny bit.
It's hard to know because I've got this tiny little thumbnail print of myself here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you, Candace.
Yeah.
So we look forward to receiving any emails from you, any comments, and as Candace mentioned, if you'd like to have a half-hour consultation with us, then please fill out the questionnaire that you can get to from our homepage at lovewithboundaries.com. We look forward to seeing you in the new year when we're going to be continuing with more webinars. Details to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, I know that this is a difficult time for everyone, for most people anyway. It's a really difficult time with everything that's going on, but I really would like to wish all of you as happy a holiday season as you can have, and we're here for you.
Thank you, Candace.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.